Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series, Bible study through Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We are on week 3 of working our way through the Old Testament book of Numbers.
Woo!
Yay!
We're already so
like 8.
far. Yeah, but we're already so far. We're in chapter 9, right?
Yeah, we're doing 9 through 12 this week.
So we're moving along. We're scooting right along.
Except for 2 verses. There are 2 verses.
Because some people might think there was a typo. Other people might think we excluded it, so you would focus on those 2 verses.
Yeah. So there's.
We'll talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh, that's what in chapter 11.
It's in chapter 11,
yeah.
And
we may or may not have intentionally omitted 2 verses.
Yeah, right. That we're going to go ahead and call that a typo. Be sure to read the extra 2 verses.
Well, because when you read them, you're like,
why are we keeping these out? I don't understand why these aren't.
Because that's
part
exactly
of our
what I
reading.
did. Yeah. But it's kind of cool because last week I think we started with where we saw a bunch of verses or a bunch of sections starting with the Lord spoke to Moses.
Yes.
And we see where God is giving these commandments to Moses, and Moses has to take them to the Israelites. Mm-hmm. Now we know that these also happen, Exodus, Leviticus, especially the giving of the law, where it was formally given, and here. It's kind of like a behind the scenes deal, and there's a different focus. And where Leviticus maybe was focusing on, here's the way Passover is going to be. Here's what you can eat. Here's what you have to wear. Here's what you have to do. Blah blah blah. Here it's a totally different viewpoint.
Yeah, because what they're finally doing is we have to get back into Exodus, where God says, here's what the tabernacle is supposed to look like, here's how the priests are supposed to dress, and then Leviticus says, here's how everybody's supposed to live. Well, we're finally to the point where they're setting up the tabernacle for the first time, right? And so all of this stuff that's been theory is now becoming reality.
That's a great way to put it.
And they have to consecrate it and set it apart and clean it and do the whole thing.
Well, we saw it with like the lampstands last week. No, this is to put some lights over here.
Right.
So that makes great sense.
So they've got a picture in their head, but they haven't really seen it yet. They've been building all the parts, but they haven't put it together.
Yeah, nice. So we see the Lord this week. We still see the Lord spoke to Moses, and we actually have a twist on one this week too. So starting in chapter 9, the Lord speaks to Moses right off the bat, and it's kind of cool because right off the bat the date's different. Yeah, the date is actually a little bit in the past. Yeah, and not that it makes that big a deal, but he's talking about Passover. As we were talking about it, and. These guys were wandering around the desert for a couple of years. So like you said, this is the first Passover, their first time doing it. So from a chronological standpoint, it's, a little bit out of place, not that much.
They're already...
but it's the important part.
Yeah. So they're already about 15, somewhere between 15 and 18 months out of Egypt. Right. And so they had done Passover coming out of Egypt.
Right, and that's really what Passover is. Right, it is when they're coming out of Egypt.
Right. So this will be the first one with the tabernacle, and really that tent of meeting that he told them to build. So they've been at Sinai. It took them 3+ months to get from Egypt to Sinai. Right. And then they've been at Sinai for a year before they leave, which we'll start seeing here in a couple of chapters in a couple of weeks or so. Next week, I think, actually. And so they're getting everything set up, getting everything ready.
Well, there's all these rules, right? And you got to believe they're going back. Okay, what's the rule? What's the rule? And one of them is you have to be ceremonial clean. Right. And there happen to be some guys who weren't. Yeah. So they come up to Moses and they're like, what do we do? Yeah. What's the rule? Yeah. And Moses says, hold on. Yep. Goes, talks to God, gets the answer, comes back and gives the answer.
And it's really cool because we will see, if we were to read the rest of Numbers and Deuteronomy and all these things, that happens fairly often early on.
Yeah. But it's It is. It's the devil in the detail.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. It's like, okay, God, you gave us this, but how does this apply in this situation? How does it apply in this situation? Is there an exception to this rule? How does this work? And they're really trying to do what
Right, exactly. Well, and where their heart is too. So these guys came up and said, "Look, we are ceremonially unclean. We came in contact with a dead body, so we can't do Passover. We want to do Passover."
right.
So it came back down that, okay, 1 month away, you can. And then God, knowing us as humans, said, here's the rule.
So I just put it off every year. Right?
Yeah. If you are ceremonial unclean, or if you are visiting, I think was the other exception, the traveling. Traveling. You can observe it 1 month later, and then he puts a catch on the end of it. Otherwise, if you don't celebrate the Passover, what word does he use? You will be cut off.
Cut off from the people. Yeah.
Yeah, cut off from your people.
Yeah.
So there's lots of discussion on. This sounds bad. What does cut off from the people mean?
Yeah.
But when you think about it, if you're cut off, does that mean you can no longer be in the middle and you have to go to the outside? Well, it seemed like it was even worse, right? That you are now, well, best case example, you're not part of the nation, you're kicked out, and you have to leave.
Excommunicated, right? Yeah.
So now you're in the desert alone, and God is feeding you. Wait, he was feeding you, now he's not.
Right.
So it's probably a death sentence. Maybe the nation of Israel stones you or kills you then,
Right.
Which is a physical death right then too. And the worst case scenario that I came up with is maybe you're no longer part of God is kicking you out from a spiritual standpoint.
Yeah.
Which would be worse than a physical death.
Right.
Because now you're going to die a physical death and a spiritual death.
Yeah.
And then reading the commentaries, one thing that other people picked up on was God doesn't give you a way to get back in. A lot of times it's you need to go to the outside for 7 days. Once you are clean, go to the go wherever somebody will certify that you're clean. Now you can come back in. That's not here.
Right.
So once you're out, you're out.
What's interesting, later on in Numbers, we'll read that if someone commits a sin unintentionally, there's always a sacrifice, there's always something they can do. But for willful, deliberate, rebellious sin, like, I know that this is absolutely wrong and I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway, the sentence was death, and there was no way in, no way back.
And no way back.
No way back. And so this is the same thing, because it's
and it's willful.
Yeah, it's willful. It's like I just don't want to do it this year. Yeah. Well, it's not really an option. Yeah. You do it, or you're not a part of what's going on here.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So also in chapter 9, they start traveling, or they're going to start traveling. So they have to come up with rules, right? And so it's a cloud by day, and a fiery appearance by night above the tabernacle. And this lets the Israelites know, hey, are we going to be moving or not moving too? Yeah. Like, do I need to pack?
Right.
Or are we going to be here a while?
Yeah.
Type of deal.
I love the phrase in here that it says whether they traveled for 2 days or for a week or for a month or for a year, it didn't really matter. Or if they camped, I guess. Yeah, if they camped in a place for 2 days or for a long time, didn't matter. The cloud told them when to move.
Yeah.
And when God was ready to move, that's when they moved. So
for whatever reason, it struck me as hilarious. I just picture one guy in the desert, not an Israelite, just, some guy in the desert, looking around, and it's just desert all over the place. Oh, here comes 2 million people. And the 2 million people are just walking by, and there's a cloud overhead, right? And they're following a cloud, and what's this guy thinking? Yeah. And then all of a sudden the cloud turns into fire. It's like that had to be a spectacle going on there.
There's a cartoon where Moses, is followed by this line of people, and of course it's always a line of like 3 people wide, so it's not, so it goes off.
Well, that's the other thing. Is it a million wide? What? And how long does it take 2 million people to walk past you?
It doesn't really matter how wide it is. It's a long stoplight if you're waiting for that to get through.
Yeah.
But they're wandering in the desert, and Moses is up front, and behind him he hears recalculating. He's like, "Shut up!"
Yeah. There's always the one where his wife finally asks for directions. So there's some good
It's just
ones
right up here.
Yeah. Chapter 10 continues it. So now that they're moving, they have another problem. How do they know when to move? How do they know when to start? How do they know? They put a whole phone system in place.
Yep.
Except they use trumpets.
Yep.
So they need to make 2 trumpets, and when the trumpets blow, that's the signal to do things.
Right.
And when one trumpet blows, it's a different signal.
Yep.
So they have all these signals
So they
going
put
on.
these signals for 5 different events.
Yeah.
Whether is it for everybody? Is it just for the leaders? We're going to
Yep.
call a special meeting. Get ready for battle.
Yep.
We're moving for
Exactly.
battle. Everybody else, the army comes forward. Everybody else falls back. Nope, we're getting up to move this time. So these 5
And
different.
some of them seem to be like at the start of a month too, almost like the practice fire alarms that we have. All right, remember the trumpets.
Remember all the drummers.
There's going to be things you have to do.
So anybody who was in the Navy remembers the whistles,
Yeah,
right?
right.
I mean,
Right.
that's
Yeah,
sort of what was going on
exactly. Right. And then the next thing is, okay, now we're moving. 2.5 people moving. There has to be an order.
Yep.
So there is a prescribed order for who's moving, who moves when, and it's kind of cool. I don't know if we put a picture up or not, but there are some pictures. Last week or the week before, we found that the tabernacle's in the middle, followed by the Levites in a circle around them, and then each tribe
4 groups of
is
3
in
tribes.
exactly the same spot every time. And the people that are on the east side, Judah was one of them. I forget the other 2, but that's fine. They move first.
Yeah.
The tribe of Judah, and somebody pointed out, hey, these guys are on the east, and that's mostly the way they're traveling. I don't know if that works or not, but I thought that was kind of a cool thing. Somebody else pointed out, well, they're also the biggest, so they get to go first.
Yeah.
You had one that you pointed out too.
Well, Judah was, if you go all the way back to Genesis 49, when Jacob was blessing or scolding, depending on how you look at it, the 12 sons, the tribes, Judah was the one, the scepter shall not depart from Judah until the one comes to whom it belongs. The messianic reference.
Right, so
Messiah is coming from the tribe of Judah.
Yeah, so they get to go first.
Yeah, so you get Judah and their other 2 tribes, and then some Levites, and then 3 more tribes, and then some Levites, and then 6 tribes in the back.
Right.
And the ark is in the front. And while they're moving, the cloud doesn't rest over the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, that's all in pieces.
Right.
It actually rests over the ark, and the ark is the first thing that goes through the...
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And again, just standing there looking at it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. It's when you have to stop because there's a processional or there's a funeral going by or there's police cars or there's sirens or something. You have to stop and watch all this stuff go by. That's sort of
basically what it was.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm trying to get to the oasis over there. Sorry, we've got the right of way.
Yeah. So in verse 29, in this chapter, we're in chapter 10.
Yeah.
Moses wants his father-in-law to come with him. So in Exodus, we know that the father-in-law's name is Jethro, but here it's Hobab.
Well, Hobab is the son of Ruel,
Okay.
and Ruel is Jethro.
Okay.
So Jethro goes back home. Hobab is still there. And Moses says, come on, why don't you come to Canaan with us? We're only, a couple of weeks away, which they were. A couple of weeks and they would have been able to go into it. And, most of the rest of this book never happens.
Yeah, right.
So we're only a couple of weeks away. Why don't you just come with us? This is the land that God is giving to us.
Yeah.
So I think it's his brother-in-law.
Okay. So at this point, they're traveling. They had the Ark of the Covenant with them, like you said. Everything's great. right? And we know the book would be really short, like you said. So something happens there.
Yeah, yeah. Judges actually tells us that he did go with them.
Yeah.
And Judges chapter 1. And yeah, so they take off. Everybody's excited. We're going to go off to the land of Canaan. And they get 3 days in.
And the nitpicking starts.
Everything falls. You ever been on a road trip with your kids in the back, right? You know,
That's
everything's
right,
good
3
for the well, a couple hours or days. You get the couple hours in, and then he's touching me, she's on my side. You get that whole thing. That's exactly what happened.
Right. So the people started to complain, and Dad got mad.
Yeah.
So God gets mad, and he burns the outside of the camp.
Yep.
Moses has to pray, and the fires go away.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest complaints seemed to be there's no meat.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm a meat eater. But it's kind of interesting that it seemed to be started by the mixed multitude.
So it's interesting
yeah.
because when I was growing up, and I know this happens in church all the time in Sunday school, we get this thought that all of Israel was complaining about the best food that they had back in Egypt, and we all wish we could go back to Egypt. These 2 million some odd people. Everybody wants to go back to Egypt. Keith Green wrote a song about that. So you want to go back to Egypt. It's a great song. If you haven't heard it, or if you haven't heard it in a long time, you got to look it up. So you want to go back to Egypt. It's a Keith Green. Funny song. It's a hilarious song. But it's this idea that the whole nation was complaining and wanting to go back.
Yeah. Doesn't seem to be the case.
That's not what it was at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of mixed multitude, sometimes it's also the rabble or the foreign rabble, which makes more sense from the standpoint of the foreigners that would have been traveling with them would have been on the outside.
Yep.
That's where the fire was.
Yep. There were some Egyptians and other foreigners that came out of Egypt with them. So they've seen the Red Sea, they've heard the law, but they're not part of Israel yet.
Right.
And there's a great so the mixed multitude is referred to several times, sometimes good, sometimes bad, usually bad. But this is actually even a subset of that. The Hebrew word is awesome. The Hebrew word is they're called the Safsuf. 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 S-A-P-H-S-U-P-H. Safsuf. And I know the Net Study Bible Note and other commentaries point out, and I point out in my notes too, that it sort of has this rhythmic quality that in English we would call them the riffraff.
Yeah.
So a lot of English translations come up with the rabble, like you said. But I like riffraff.
Yeah, riffraff.
Because it has that
causing trouble.
The same feel as Safsuf.
They're just the one flicking.
Yeah, they're just constantly poking. And like you said, they're on the outside and they've seen God's fire and they're complaining and they're just the riffraff. They're not going with what's going on with Israel.
Right.
And they're causing trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So the cool thing is we get to hear a little bit what man is like. I don't know that we've had that before. And then we get to hear that they get meat, right? So they get quail, and there's a bunch of meat that they get. Also in this chapter, I call it Moses has a meltdown. But 2.5 million people are saying, my toilet's backed up. I got this problem. There's no water. I guess water that comes later, but there's no quail. There's no meat.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do about it, Moses? And then Moses is going back to God. I didn't sign up for this.
I didn't want to do this in the first place. I know. That's a great line. Why did you put me in this position? I didn't even want to do it in the first place, and now you've got all these people coming to me.
Right. Right. So we know back in Exodus, Moses is talking to Jethro, right? And Jethro says, "Hey, get some people to help you out."
Yeah, why are you trying to do this by yourself?
Yeah. So now it seems to be these same elders,
I think so.
70 elders or so, but they also seem to be consecrated. Where now God is like, okay, you guys are part of the leadership team.
Yeah, so they've been helping Moses, a little bit from what we can tell. But yeah, now they're officially appointed by God. All of Israel, this is Moses through these guys.
Right.
You know,
Right.
they've got my support in a sense. I mean, it's sort of a bad way to say it with God,
Yeah.
but God says, these are the guys.
And they prophesize as a tale or as a telling sign, I would think.
Yeah,
that
so
they-
God actually sent the Holy Spirit on them,
Yeah.
and they gave a prophecy. And it specifically says it never happened again. It was a one-time deal. This wasn't like, oh, now we get to prophesy all over the place.
Yeah.
But it was, and this is a
And you
perfect
think everything is
example
going to be perfect?
of a miracle, a sign that was given to authenticate the person, authenticate the message, and then it was over, like the sign gifts that we see in the New Testament.
Yep. And of course, so other people are prophesying. Joshua, who becomes famous later, tells on him.
Yeah, for
and,
some
and Moses says, "Look, I don't know if you're trying to make me jealous or not.
Yeah.
I'm not. I wish God put more people in charge."
Yeah, right. So there's these two guys that weren't even part of the group, and it's like they got some extra of the Holy Spirit or
Yeah,
something.
spilled off on
It's just
them.
spilled off. It's just like God splashed it on the 70 and they got a drop over there or something. Of course, that's not how it works. But and they prophesied too. And somebody came to Moses. They're prophesying, and Joshua was like, "What should we do?" You know. And Moses is like, "Let God do what God does."
Yeah.
Not unlike. James and John came to Jesus. Don't you know that there are these other people that are doing this in your name? Okay.
Yeah.
Paul in Philippians is in prison. Don't you know the people are preaching the gospel while you're in prison? Okay. So we see this theme.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to see it in the next chapter. The next chapter too. So at the end of the day, or whenever, quail came and people ate.
Yeah.
And turns out there was a plague.
Yeah.
Right. So it seems that the people who ate the quail died.
Yeah.
So obviously, a subset of people. Not everybody ate it. So just from reading numbers, it seems like quail only came once.
Yeah.
But don't we hear in different places that quail came more than once? Exodus
16 talks about a thing of quail. Some people make these to be the same event. I don't think they're the same event. I always thought that it was a regular thing. I'm not convinced of that. I think maybe it was if they're not the same event, it looks like maybe it happened twice. But it wasn't a daily thing, but it's really weird that there's enough details that seem to be different that it makes them seem different. But it's really hard to tell.
Okay. All right, so then we get into chapter 12, which is our last chapter, I think 16 verses long. And there's a lot going on in here, but Moses seems to have a new wife. Mm-hmm. So the big question is, is this now his second wife? Mm-hmm. Did his first wife die? What's going on here? Do we know what's going on here?
Well, it's definitely his second wife. His first wife was from Midian, Jethro's daughter, not from Ethiopia. Cush is an Old Testament name for Ethiopia. The fact that Miriam is really upset about this also makes it seem like this is a second wife. I'm not sure why she would be upset.
Okay. That's going to be the next question.
If Zipporah, his first wife, had died,
right?
Maybe she's just prejudiced. She didn't like Ethiopians. Whatever the thing is. There's nothing in Scripture that condemns polygamy at all, Old Testament or New Testament. So even if Zipporah were still alive, not a big deal.
Right.
Okay. But this is, at this point, this is probably 40, 41, 42 years since he married her. So it's possible that she died. Because they got married when, shortly after he left Egypt the first time when he was about 40 years old. The Exodus was another 40 years later after he was about 80 years old. So there's some time. It's possible that she died. But again, even if she didn't, there's no law against it. So it's we don't know what her problem was.
Yeah. So Miriam and Aaron got mad.
Yeah.
And they used the wife as the point that they were mad about.
Yeah.
Well, first, they're all siblings, right?
Yeah.
Moses, Aaron, and Miriam.
Yeah.
Miriam.
Yeah, Miriam was the one who watched Moses while he was in the basket in the Nile River,
Right.
All the way back.
So
in
older
Exodus.
sister.
Older
right?
sister, yep, and
Right.
older brother.
Yeah. Well, and maybe there's some jealousy going on here.
Could be.
In charge, but Moses has some special things that happen to him that aren't necessarily happening to them, and they just put 70 more people kind of in charge too.
Yeah.
So did they feel like they were demoted? Maybe that's part of going.
You ever
on
watch
there,
the Godfather movie?
Yeah.
I sort of see Miriam and Connie, Michael's sister, sort of having the same temperament, personality. I don't know if that's just me reading into it, but I just sort of see that
Israeli, Italian.
yeah. I love verse 3, by the way, though. Verse 3 is great because Moses wrote this. Unless somebody added it later on, which I suppose is possible, but it says, "Now the man Moses was very humble, more so than any man on the face of the earth." And only a humble person could write that, of course.
Right.
Or somebody who's writing down what the Holy Spirit inspires, right?
Yeah.
But I always love that, just sort of tucked away in there. And let's not forget, who really is this Moses guy? What a humble guy he is.
So there's an issue going on here, and there's a problem,
Yep.
and I really like what God did, and it's the twist. Now instead of the Lord spoke to Moses, it's the Lord told all three of them, "Hey, yeah,
It's time to come to the
meeting in the
principal's
principal's office now." And
Yep.
so all three went. Okay. But I love it from the standpoint, if we think about it, we really have three leaders who are now having a management type problem.
That's a really good point.
So you have the president calling them into the office and saying, look, Moses is my guy. I'm going to treat him different. I can do that.
Yep.
I can do that. You two, here's what's going on with you.
Yep.
And if you think about it, if God only communicated with Moses, and then Moses is talking to the other two.
He said, "I'm the most humble guy."
God said this is the way it is.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it just doesn't. There's too much room for lying in there, or too much room for error in there. So you call everybody together, and
It's a
and you
face to
resolve
face.
it.
We're gonna settle this
Yeah.
right now.
Well, it was a voice to voice.
Well,
right?
it's true. Yeah.
Could
But
be-
they heard him.
Yeah.
They heard God speak.
Yeah, so it'd been hard to.
Yeah.
They're not lying, but kind of cool from that standpoint.
Yep.
So there wasn't a wedge in there. There wasn't a problem, or didn't seem to be a problem. Miriam then had leprosy for 7 days.
Well,
did Aaron too?
Yeah. So, no, not Aaron, but so fast. Like Aaron turned to talk to her, and she was covered, like just that fast. So apparently, she was the instigator.
Yeah. Which makes it seem like, and she's listed first.
She's listed first, and in Hebrew, the verbs have a built-in pronoun for the
Right.
subject, where it's like he said or she said. The verbs are all she was doing this.
Yeah,
So yet again, we have Aaron just following along for the ride, which has been the same problem
theme
that
in
he's
there.
had going all the way back to the golden
So listen,
calf
the
and
Godfather
everything.
hates Frodo.
we got Fredo going on.
Fredo,
Yeah. There's no doubt. He's just going along for the ride. The older sister, whatever, is really
Yeah. Right.
doing all this. And so he turned to talk to her. We don't know what he was going to say, whatever. And all of a sudden he just realizes, you are covered with this skin disease.
Right. So she has to not leave Israel, but leave her spot in camp and go to the outside, just like anybody else would have to do.
Yep.
Until she's clean.
Yep.
And you pointed out the cool thing is God waited on her.
Yeah. Well, because the expectation I think that Aaron had was, Moses, pray to God, have her healed, have her cleansed. And so Moses prays, and God says, I gave you the law of how to handle this.
Yeah.
She's going to go do the same thing everybody else has to do. She's
Right.
going to go outside.
So
She's
you
going
go
to
to
wait.
the outside and everybody leaves. Man, you're sick.
Yeah.
Trying to travel.
Yeah,
and,
trying
and
to
get
have
there.
Yep.
Yeah.
She's going to have to come be inspected by a priest. She's going to have to offer the sacrifices. She's going to have to do the same thing as everybody else. But yeah, God had them parked there for 7 days and just wait until Miriam was clean.
Nice.
And then we could go back to normal. So there is some grace in there,
Right.
but she was no different. She, even though she was, one of the VPs, even she, you still got to follow the law.
Right. So cool. I don't know. I felt like we went long today, but there was also a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of chapters in there.
Yeah. Next week comes to one of the most famous stories in the book of Numbers. They make the couple of week trek to the southern point of Canaan, and they get ready to go in, and we see what happens next week when they finally do that.
All right, good.
So we're on the journey. We're finally there. The count has been taken. The tabernacle has been built. Everything's been ready to go. We're ready to take off. And we're 3 days.
Everything's gonna be perfect.
Everything's good. And 3 days in, everybody's already falling apart. This is going to be a long
Welcome
journey.
to spring.
Well, hopefully you enjoyed this little survey, this little trip through these chapters in Numbers. I hope you're enjoying Numbers. Most people don't think of it as, like,
Joyful.
yay, let's read Numbers. But I hope you're enjoying it and learning some things along the way. And we'll pick this up where we are here in chapter 13 next week.
Bye, everyone.